Guardians, this is a weird one. The new hand cannon, originally shown in the Lightfall artwork, has finally arrived. You can pick up the quest for this weapon from Nimbus on Neomuna. Just go talk to them and they'll give you a quest for it. It's an easy one. I want to say it took me maybe 20-ish minutes, and it's basically just walking around Neomuna, killing Cabal and Vex in a few different locations. The weapon is definitely very cool, very stylish. For one thing, it looks great, better than I expected honestly, and it shades really well, especially with the photo finish shader, which gives it a very nice kind of RGB color change effect, but with darker colors, and it honestly does look really sick. I was a little disappointed that it was a 140. We already have a ton of fantastic 140s in the game, and I was really hoping this would be a 120, but let's talk about its performance. I want to point out right now, due to some of the lore on the weapon, some people are theorizing that it will eventually get more perks or something of the sort, but until that's confirmed to be the case, I wanted to talk about this weapon in its base form. Now, your barrel perk is small bore, your mag perk is ricochet rounds, and your masterwork is handling. In the third and fourth columns, you have Eye of the Storm and Keep Away for PvP, and Stats for All and Incandescent for PvE. I wasn't sure what to expect of this weapon. Hand cannons are in a weird spot right now. They struggle in PvP compared to SMGs and pulse rifles, and they serve no real purpose in PvE at all. Part of me was hoping this hand cannon would be the next Fellwinter's Lie, that it would release and just be completely mind-blowing. But I also knew that probably wasn't a realistic expectation. This weapon still surprised me. I actually really like it for the most part, but it has some quirks. There are some issues here. Let me get PvE out of the way first. It's a fine PvE roll. With Incandescent, enemies will explode on final blows, and any enemies that are within the blast radius will be damaged and have Scorch applied to them. Incandescent is great for solar builds, particularly any that center around ignitions. With Stats for All, hitting 3 separate targets will give you a boost to your range, handling, stability, and reload speed. Definitely more of a PvE perk, and one that's very easy to proc and semi-helpful. I say semi-helpful because I would rather have something that increases my damage here, but it's still helpful and it's extremely easy to activate in PvE. So if you're a newer player and you don't have a good solar weapon with Incandescent, then this is an option. The main issue here is hand cannons are a bottom tier choice for PvE. In fact, they would probably be my last choice for a primary. It's a good roll. There's just no reason to use a hand cannon over other primaries in PvE. SMGs, auto rifles, pulse rifles, bows, even scout rifles will all serve you way better in PvE than a hand cannon. They don't have the mag capacity to ad clear properly, and they don't have enough damage output for orange bars or even just normal ad clear in higher difficulty content like GMs or master raids. If you really want to use a hand cannon in PvE for personal enjoyment or whatever, then this one is fine, but even then I would probably still take Sunshot over this weapon. Now PvP is a different story, and this is where Epochal integration gets kind of weird. For the PvP role, again, we have Eye of the Storm and Keep Away. Keep Away boosts your range, reload speed, and accuracy when enemies are more than 15 meters away from you. Eye of the Storm boosts your handling and accuracy as your health gets lower. To be honest, while Eye of the Storm is nice on just about any weapon, the handling on this weapon is already high enough that this weapon would be better off with another perk. My first choices for replacements here would be Slide Shot or Opening Shot. Slide Shot specifically for the plus 20 boost to your range when you slide, or Opening Shot for the boost to range and aim assist on your first shot, which just helps make the weapon a lot more consistent as a whole. Moving on, the range at first appears to be lacking at 54, but of course Keep Away gives you a passive plus 10 to your range as long as your opponents are outside of 15 meters from you. 64 range is fine on hand cannons, not in the same realm as stat monsters like Palindrome or Exalted Truth of course, but still perfectly usable. If an enemy gets inside of 15 meters from you, you'll lose that 10 range from Keep Away, but you'll still have enough range to do max damage to them, and realistically, if you've allowed someone to get that close to you, and you're using a hand cannon, you're just going to get torn apart by a submachine gun anyway. That being said, the range is still probably going to be the biggest issue on this weapon. There are a ton of other legendary hand cannons that have way better range. Exalted Truth, Ostringer, Rose, even the new Spare Rations can get better range than Epochal can. The other issue is Epochal has a lower aim assist stat than a lot of legendary hand cannons at 71. Compare this to Austringer at 75, Rose at 85, Palindrome at 79, or the new Spare Rations at 83. Epochal's aim assist is closer to that of Ace of Spades at 70 or Exalted Truth at 72. But Ace has 85 range stock, plus the extreme forgiveness that the damage boost from Mori gives you, and Exalted Truth is a stat monster, so they can get away with it. Aim assist might not seem all that important, particularly on M&K, but in Destiny 2 it does make a difference. Those are the major downsides, so what do I like about this weapon? Really, it's just that this hand cannon feels good. What I mean by that is that it just feels so good to shoot. It's quite possibly the most stable hand cannon in the game. Recoil is basically non-existent on this thing. You do not have to try to control this weapon at all. Epochal's recoil makes Palindrome's recoil look like 120 recoil. This is just a very flat shooting weapon. You will not have to worry about controlling your recoil at all at any time for any reason. It's a hand cannon that just feels very nice every time you pull the trigger. The lack of recoil makes this a duelist's dream. But that's all that I can really say that's good about this weapon. There are some issues here. Hand cannons in general are dueling weapons, and given that with the current sandbox encouraging teams to hold hands, the term duel may as well be retired because it's fairly rare to find yourself in 1v1 gunfights anymore. Anytime you see a ping on your radar, it's best to just assume there's more than one opponent nearby. On top of that, like I said, this hand cannon is lacking in range. 64 range with keep away active isn't bad, but there are still way better options there with more reach. Now the range changes that Bungie has discussed, and I have a feeling I'll be bringing this up a lot in future reviews, will make this weapon perform better. They said pulse rifles, hand cannons, and auto rifles will essentially share the same range space, which means hand cannons as a whole are getting a buff to their base range. This weapon currently has an effective range of just barely under 31 meters. Once the range changes go into effect, I'd imagine this will go up to around 35-ish meters, give or take a little. The issue is that even then, unless pulse rifles get a coinciding nerf to something like their recoil or aim assist, pulse rifles are still infinitely more forgiving weapons than hand cannons are, which is why I'm not overly excited for the range changes. I still expect pulse rifles will be dominant in that mid-range space. And when the range changes do go into effect, there will still be better options. Weapons such as Exalted Truth, Palindrome, Rose, Austringer, Ace of Spades, and more will still have superior range to Epochal integration. Not to mention, if I'm correct, and I believe I am here, and pulse rifles remain dominant at those ranges, then a 120 may be a better choice overall, since 120s have an easier time hitting higher ranges than 140s. Ironically enough, if this weapon was a 120 like I'd hoping it would be, and it had this same role, it would honestly perform better than it does now as a 140. Now, if pulse rifles do see a nerf at some point, and at the very least the high impact ones such as No Time and Messenger are long overdue for one, and that's a big if because it's very clear that Bungie has a favorite type of player, then hand cannons may fall back into favor, and in that instance this becomes a very good weapon. But until then, this is just a solid overall hand cannon that doesn't do anything spectacular in a sandbox where a hand cannon has to do something spectacular to really be competitive. Now, like I said, there are theories going around that this weapon may receive additional perks in the future. If that's the case, then that may change things and this may become a great weapon. If that happens, I'll pick it up again and re-review it, assuming it becomes better. But until then, that's my stance on this weapon. Is it worth your time to pick up? Yes, it is. It's not a bad hand cannon right now, and it will perform better in the future. Plus, if there's one thing it has going for it, it's extremely accessible. One quick quest and you have the weapon. It's that easy. That's pretty much all that I have to say on Epochal integration. It's a cool weapon and a fun one to use, but it definitely isn't a top tier performer by any stretch of the imagination. But that's all from me today, Guardians. If you enjoyed the video, let me know in the comments. Let me know if you've got this weapon and if you're liking it or not. As always, don't forget to leave me a like and hit that subscribe button with the bell icon. It really helps me out a ton. For now, I will see you all in the next video. Peace, Guardians.